Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Accepted Authority. I'm Andy Marmont.
I'm Greg Roworth.
And each week we talk about attracting and converting premium clients consistently and predictably by sharing our own experiences as business owners and as consultants. Now, this week we've got a really interesting topic that's dear to my heart. It's all about how we're going to influence and reach our ideal clients. So we've got a couple of things that we want to talk about here. But we might sort of open up, Greg, in your experience, you're highly credentialed, you've written a book, you've done the hard yards and growing and selling a number of businesses. How do you reach and influence your ideal client?
Yeah, well, that, it really does come back to messaging and, there are a number of vehicles about how you go about that. But I think, first of all, the ideal client is the appropriate word, or two words, but because it's, the way we reach our ideal clients is to know where they hang out, where are they receptive to content or, to receiving your message. So, firstly, I think that's the critical questions that we need to be asking as as professionals or consultants, that, who specifically is our ideal client and where am I likely to be able to contact them? The mistake I see a lot of people making is that they'll just jump on the latest social media fad or, or they'll listen to someone and say, well, you've got to be on Facebook or you've got to be on LinkedIn or you've got to be on TikTok or who knows. I'm not sure what TikTok is really, apart from what happens with my watch. But but that's the flip that I see in our thinking that we need to have first is really be specific about who is our ideal client, so that we know are they likely to be on Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere else where I can create some sort of content or messaging that they will be receptive to. So it comes back to that. But before I go on with more about that, tell me about your experience, Andrew. And what's
I think it's
your expertise.
Yeah, I mean you're right, Greg. It's all about actually being really focused about not trying to serve a number of people, but just trying to serve one, pick one. And then you, as you say, you really get to know who they are, where they hang out. And I think in consulting, there's a lot of different ideas about there, but you'll find that LinkedIn, for example, is probably the easiest way to get direct connection with a lot of your ideal clients. LinkedIn's great because you can really go and narrow the search if people update their profiles correctly. And then it just comes down to understanding a bit more about the language that they use, the problems that they have, whether you actually speak to your clients regularly and you get a sense of that. And from that, you're able to then tailor conversations and start to, talk to people. And even as far early as today, I reached out to someone who I used to work with in the consulting space and said, look, this is what we're doing. Would you be interested? It's a 12-week program that focuses on these three sort of key areas. And he came back and said, I've been following your posts and it's great to see what you're doing. And I thought, it just shows you that when we're looking at attracting and influencing our ideal client, as long as you're consistent and you really focus on the things that they're struggling with, then whether people read or comment or not, if you're putting yourself out there consistently and you're constantly tinkering with the messaging and ensuring that it does get connection, then you're going to be in a much stronger position than someone who does like random marketing and just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, totally. And you mentioned, well, two things really stood out in what you said to me. Firstly, the languaging of your messaging, that fits your ideal client. And what I see a lot is that the language on most professionals' websites is very generic, and
yes.
it's sort of tailored so that it's not, or it's inclusive of everyone who could possibly be a client, instead of really narrowing down to a specific client. And, I understand the thinking about that. Why would we want to narrow down our focus and miss opportunities? But the reality is, with messaging, if it's generic and, well, it's really, tends to be watered down to fit everyone in. So when you do that, you actually don't really communicate effectively with anyone. So, the languaging to really fit your ideal client's specific situation is really important in getting that message across, because they're more receptive to something that's really tailored to them. So you end up having much greater impact with your messaging when it's focused and targeted to a specific niche market. The other thing you said, if I can remember it now, towards the end, it's just slipped my mind, but the consistency of being consistent about presenting content and being seen in the market, elevates your authority positioning already. And if you're just, as you mentioned, the random marketing, random acts of marketing that's a lot of people do. When we get quiet and need to go to market, just to start messaging then, when that message comes, to someone, it tends to be out of context. There's no real authority around that messaging. A lot of people do it the wrong way, so it's perceived as spam. So there's a lot of benefit in being consistently seen, to be sharing your expertise, your opinions, your thoughts. Even though you mightn't get a lot of feedback until the situation like you just mentioned, you happen to reach out to someone and they feedback, oh, yeah, I've seen your content. That happens to me a lot as well. People who don't like my content, in that terms, or make comments on it, but I might bump into them somewhere, and they mention that they've seen my posts and like them. So so I think that consistency is a very important part of the process as well.
Now, you've written a book, Greg.
Well, a couple of books actually, but
you're a multi project author, and getting that message right. If you're gonna write a book, a body of work like that, which if you're watching and you run a consulting firm, then it might be a series of posts, it might be a series of webinars, whatever the program looks like. In your case, books. How did you land on the messaging when it comes to the title, when it comes to hooking people in, when it comes to ensuring that they actually get to the end of the book? How did you go about? What was the process, Greg, about doing that?
Yeah, good questions there, Andrew. For me, it was being in the game myself, and mixing with a lot of other consultants and business coaches and accountants, from the accounting stream originally. I could see that most of those people were struggling with the same struggles that I had. So I understood that struggle. I'd been there myself and, been in their situation. So, having managed to rise above that challenge and have some solutions to it, I thought that I had some positive, experiences to share with other people, because for me, I've always wanted to help others, and if I can see that I've got some solutions and some answers, then I'm willing to share. So a book was a good way to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of work in a book. So as much as it sounds odd, having written 2 books, I don't recommend that the book is the first place to go to, for sharing expertise or sharing your content. But it is, if you can get that accepted authority position,
yes,
and you already have some flow of people wanting to know more from you, then it's a good time to add a book to that process. But yeah, coming up with the content, the title, all of those things for me was specifically around, who am I writing to?
Yeah.
And either what problem am I solving or what solution am I providing? Or not so much the solution, but the outcome that I'm looking for. Because as funny as it is, as professional service providers, nobody actually wants our services. They want the outcomes that those services provide. So, a big mistake I see a lot of professionals making is promoting their services, which creates a disconnect, because no one really wants those services unless they know what the outcomes of those services are. So yeah, writing the books and the content, then became around, who am I writing to? Who's this? Who does this have meaning for? In other words, so people need to know that it's relevant to them. And then what's the outcome of reading this book? And then the content really just flowed from there. That step by step. First of all, identifying with the people I'm writing to, so that they understood that I've been where they are. I've walked in their shoes. I've struggled with the same challenges. So they know that I wasn't some overnight success. I wasn't someone who came in and hit the ground running and everything fell into place. There are some people out there, sort of providing advice or expertise like that. But to me, there's a hollowness about that sort of advice, because they haven't really been through the same struggles as most of us have been. So for me, it's putting myself in my readers' shoes, showing them I've been there, and identifying with the struggles they're going through, but then sharing with them how I overcame those challenges and putting into place the results of what I went through, and the outcomes I was able to achieve through that process.
I love that distinction, Greg, where you say that it's not about people don't buy the services, or don't promote your services, promote the outcome. In reality, is that really around talking about customer stories and case studies and real life examples and linking it back? Is that what would your advice be?
Yeah, well, that's definitely helpful to have practical examples of where the systems have been used, but also it's more about not just teaching people what they should know, or because in my experience, people often already know what they need to know.
Yes.
They just don't put it into practice, or or they don't have. They might have read a book about swimming, but until you get in the water, do you really know how to swim? So a lot of people have knowledge, but they don't really have the practical ability to put that knowledge into use. So that's that. In a way, if I just write another book that gives them more knowledge, then I'm just adding to the confusion in a way.
Yes.
I'm just adding more white noise to the situation. Yeah. So the way I tend to write my books is to try to cut through that noise in a way and give them practical ways they can implement the knowledge rather than just add more knowledge.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic advice. And certainly being able to reach and influence your ideal client is a bit of a journey. It involves a lot of testing and data. And if you are going through a campaign, or you're starting a campaign, then I guess the advice that we're landing on here is have one niche, one target market, have some messaging that you think that would be appropriate to them. Go out and test it, door knock digitally, connect with new people, put content out there that you think that they would be relevant to, and then measure, get some feedback, because you'll get feedback pretty instantly. People are good at telling you their opinion on things. So that's we'll wrap that one up there, Greg.
I mean, one thing I was wondering though, from your perspective, Andrew. I mean, I'm talking maybe more of a macro level, but you've come from a journalistic background, so maybe at a micro level, how do you see those concepts applying from your perspective, and maybe shorter form content, or other ways that you work with clients?
I think that the way that you can get the cut through is to think about, it's all about a war of attention nowadays. So previously we would write big long LinkedIn articles or LinkedIn posts or big long emails and newsletters, and now it's really almost about being better at being concise. And instead of doing one email a month, it's a weekly email, but having one theme and break it up to different topics. For example, if it's on, say, LinkedIn, then instead of having a big long post, it might be, the top three sentences are the things that are going to hook people in. You're essentially an editor of your own media house. So you've got to just always think about, what are people going to stop and look at? And it's the same with your webinars, the same with your other events that you're doing. It's the same with if you're building a campaign where you're sort of messaging people and connecting with the right people. I feel like you've just got to give people the respect that they're inundated anyway with noise and messages, as you said, Greg. So how do we quickly get to the point and have a mixture of, are we going to ask them every so often, is this something you're interested in? But also give them value and build that value and build that relationship. So I think it's just that mixture of shorter, concise messaging, testing the data, and being in it for the long haul.
Yeah, no, I like that. And yeah, it definitely is a war for attention, and people will have very short attention spans. So it's, capturing that attention in short form content first. And then if they have, we do capture their attention, then, ideally, it's them looking for what's next. This has been it's like the taste tempter piece, isn't it? It's just, here's a sample, if you want more of that, here's where you need to go next. So if we can provide that pathway for them, I think that, to me, it's never about one piece of content. It's always about, what's the pathway that we're leading people on, and, what sort of content do we need to provide at each step on that pathway. And, and there might be a number of different pathways perhaps, but, we need to have the content, formulated in our mind as, like breadcrumbs in a way. What's the step-by-step, one breadcrumb that gets them interested, then the next one they're looking for, and then the following one, and so on, to bring them to a point where they're actually influenced by us and ready to work with us, ideally, rather than just informing them about the 7 ways to solve their problem.
I love that distinction. I'd love to learn more. I'm sure a lot of other people who are watching or listening would love to learn more about creating, influencing at the different levels, because as we know, there's very few people who are ready to buy right now. There might be a bigger group that are maybe looking to buy in the next 4 to 12 months, and there's probably a group there that just aren't interested at all. So maybe we do another episode on breaking that down a little bit, and then getting people some food for thought about where, if they're struggling with attracting new, then what do we need to create? If they're struggling with, maybe they've got them in, but they're just not getting engagement, how do we do that? And of course, at the end, how do we convert more? So we'll come back to those. So thanks, Greg. Now, where can we find you? We want to connect with you.
Yeah, well, LinkedIn, just search Greg Roworth and you'll find me pretty easily. Otherwise, go to my website, businessflightpath.com, and you'll be able to find some of my content there, and reach out, and if you want to start with the content, and email me from there. I'm happy to talk from there.
Awesome. And Andy Marmont, you can jump on LinkedIn, Andy Marmont, or Concurve, so conqurve.com.au. Thanks again, Greg. We'll see you next time.
Pleasure, Andrew.